Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into something pretty incredible: how designers take a totally solid floor and make it look like it's a moving, flowing body of water. It's this amazing mix of some serious tech and pure art that honestly makes you second guess what you're seeing. So, let's just dive right in. Imagine this. You walk into a building and there's a shimmering river running right across the marble floor. It looks so real that for a second you might actually pause before stepping on it, but it's completely solid. So, how in the world is that possible?
Well, the secret isn't magic, though it might as well be. It's actually a brilliant combination of visual trickery and some really advanced materials. So let's go beneath the surface, literally, and find out how it's done.
The key here isn't paint. It's something called a 3D epoxy floor mural. And what that is essentially is an insanely realistic, super high resolution picture of water that's been sealed underneath a thick, clear, glassy coating.
It really boils down to two key parts working together. First, you've got the mural. That's the picture, right? It provides all the beautiful photorealistic details: the waves, the rocks, maybe even some fish swimming around. And then you have the epoxy resin. That's what gives it that feeling of depth, that super glossy finish, and of course, makes it tough enough to walk on. When you put those two together, you get this absolutely stunning illusion. A firm in Dubai really made this famous with these huge custom floors where it looks like plants and fish are just popping up from below as you walk past. It's like having a permanent window to an underwater world right at your feet. Okay, so we get what it is, but what about the how? How do you actually turn a plain old slab of marble into a masterpiece that looks like a flowing river? Well, the installation is a surprisingly intense and detailed process. It all breaks down into these 6 crucial stages. You start with picking the design and printing it, then you have to prep the surface, lay it on the image, and then comes the big steps: pouring the epoxy and adding a final protective coat. Trust me, this is not a simple paint job. It's a super technical installation that takes multiple days. All right, so that prep work, it is absolutely everything, especially when you're working with something like marble. See, marble is naturally smooth, it's not porous, which means the epoxy has nothing to stick to. So what installers have to do is first grind the surface to give it some texture, and then they apply a special primer to make sure everything bonds. You can't skip this step. Next, they lay down the mural itself, and this is where things have to be perfect. They carefully stick down the vinyl print and have to smooth it out with extreme care to get rid of every single bubble or wrinkle. Once it's completely flat, they seal up the edges so none of that liquid epoxy can sneak underneath. And now for the main event, the epoxy flood coat. This is where they pour a clear, self-leveling epoxy resin over the whole image. Self-leveling just means it naturally spreads out into a perfectly smooth, even layer. We're usually talking about a layer that's about 2 to 3 millimeters thick. This is what seals in the art and creates that real sense of depth. The environment for this step is so important. It's kind of wild. The room has to be totally spotlessly clean. Some pros will even build a temporary clean room around the area, because if just one tiny speck of dust lands in that epoxy while it's curing, it's trapped there forever, and it can mess up the entire illusion. And finally, after the epoxy has cured and is rock solid, they add a protective top coat. This is usually a really tough polyurethane that basically acts like a shield. It keeps the floor from getting scratched up by shoes or furniture, and it also has UV stabilizers in it to stop the whole thing from turning yellow over time. They can even add in an anti-slip texture for safety. So we've gone through the whole process. But why does it work so well? Why does our brain totally fall for this illusion? Well, it really comes down to a few key principles of how we see the world. There are really 4 things working together here to trick your eyes. First, you have that super high-res image, which gives you all the realistic detail. Second, that thick epoxy layer creates actual physical depth between you and the image. Third, the super glossy finish reflects light in the exact same way a real water surface would. And finally, because it's a seamless floor with no grout lines, there's nothing to break the illusion. It's that combo that makes it so convincing. And this really highlights how practical the whole thing is. Unlike a sticker or a painted design, the artwork is literally locked inside a rock-hard layer of resin. It's completely protected from scuffs and scratches. The illusion is actually part of the floor, and it's built to last for a really long time.
Now, before you start picturing a tropical lagoon in your bathroom, there is one really important thing to keep in mind. This is definitely not a simple weekend project, and there's a very good reason for that. Industry experts will tell you that creating these floors is, and I'm quoting here, technically hard work that demands a lot of experience and specialist knowledge. So yeah, that's a pretty clear signal from the pros. This is a job you hire a specialized team for, not one for the average DIYer.
I mean, just think about the skills you need. You have to have an artistic eye for the design, a technical understanding of epoxy chemistry, an insane level of precision to avoid any mistakes, and a whole lot of patience for all the drying and curing times. It's a true craft. So we've seen how a floor can go from being just a functional surface to a permanent, durable, incredible piece of art. And it leaves you with a really fun question to think about. If your floor could be absolutely anything, what would you want it to show?